It's recording. So welcome everybody to CBOR Interim. The agenda has been posted, and I'm gonna ask you to write your names into the Etherpad. Please note this is an IETF meeting, so the IETF note well applies. And the first item on the agenda is CBOR status. So I posted in the Etherpad some summary from the last meeting we had. There was a couple of action points. So Karsten, do you want to take this?
Yeah, that's pretty simple because I completely screwed up on this. So none of the action points are actually done, except that I did talk to additional implementers. So I actually expect a little bit more input at some point from at least one of them, but it should come in the next few days. So it should be useful. I'm trying to share my slides at the moment.
I can see them.
Okay, good. So I'm using a small display, so I have a low bit rate, and you can zoom in your client. So if that is too small for you to read,
it's fine. It's showing the available panel.
It is okay. Interesting. I'm always amazed at how often this software actually changes, which is a good thing to a certain extent, but sometimes it isn't. We wanted to have a new version out 4 days ago. That didn't happen, and I probably need 4 more days to actually do that. We will be very close to the end of month milestone we had set, but we might still be making it.
That's good. So I haven't seen any implementers review since last meeting. So you said some more comments. Are these in the GitHub or?
They will probably come in using GitHub, yes.
Okay. So I will keep track of that.
Yeah, we had a small amount of discussion on the GitHub and agreed that 65,535 was exactly the tag number we wanted to have for no tag. In hindsight, that's completely obvious, but it took us a while to get there.
Okay. Good. So yeah, we're still up for this timeline of end of the month for the next submission. Okay, so we're waiting on that before we ship it, or we see if anything else comes up. Yes. So the number 177, review the list for history, that was on me, and this was about the tag policy. So I have done that, and there has been the discussion. I actually could not find. I kind of remember we discussed this on a face-to-face as well, but I could not find minutes about that. We have too many minutes. So
Yes.
do you if anybody remembers when we discussed which IETF we discussed tag policies, that would be helpful.
It was a while ago.
Otherwise, I will try to find it again.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was basically one thread that was mid of last year or August, and it was never really concluded. So there was some discussion, but it wasn't concluded. So we will get back to that. before submission, or before end of the month. Sounds good?
Yeah, if if there's a need for repair, so we can make a proposal.
Yes. Okay. So I think that's good for the CBOR BIS. And if there is nothing else, Mike, I can see that he's in the call. We can talk about the date and time tag document.
Hello. Thank you. As those of you who've looked at it, the date and time tag document is very simple. It has an introduction and an IANA consideration section that registers now 2 tags, one for text string date and the other for numeric date. The numeric date is the one that was proposed by Jorg, and I've included him as an author. This is, I think, good enough that the things could be registered. My question to the chairs here is, want to adopt this as a working group document and go quickly to working group last call to turn it into an RFC, or what is your sense on how we finish such documents so they become stable? Any feedback from the chairs? Are you hearing me?
Yes, we're.
Okay.
Jim, you want to take it, or?
Well, the problem is the answer is I don't really know what the answer is yet. Do you have one?
I think that would be a good good way forward, but
and that's sort of a normal IETF thing to do.
Yeah. And Carsten also wanted to say something. I don't know if he has more opinion, but I'd like to hear from more people. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that there are 2 parts to this question. One is, what is actually the status we give these documents? Is this an informational document? Is this a standards track document? And we have certain pockets in the IETF where we have lots of documents that register something, and these are all informational, but then they are being used with normative intent in other documents. So essentially the IESG review for because but when people actually we a bit more of review before it gets added to the downref list. And that is a common way of handling things in the IETF. It would be a little bit of a default way of doing things for me. So people can also simply reference the registry. I'm not sure that this is a very well-established way, but I have at least seen that. So maybe you can have a normative document that is not actually going to the defining document, but to the registry. So that would be another way to handle the downref situation. So that's a part where I think we need a little bit area director input on what's the procedure that the ISG will like us to follow. And on the number of documents that we will get this way, of course, that could be quite a few. So I continue to believe that maybe we should do some consolidated documents. There are several tag definitions that are actually quite useful that currently only exist in some random websites. And we could do that in order to, we could take that input and consolidate it into a federal tags document or something like that, in order to have an archival document in one place. So that would be my proposal, what we should do once we are done with CBOR.
So I understand that there's a lot of various tags that one could define and that may be defined in multiple places. And this working group could choose to do a consolidated document. In this case, this is motivated by a specific request from ISO for a fast track mobile driver's license piece of work. And I think we owe it to ISO both to finish this quickly and to make it an RFC. ISO and a lot of the national bodies respect RFCs. They might not be so happy referencing something that's really just in a registry, but pointing to an unfinished draft. So for this document, I'd like to request that we do working group adoption. I'm fine if the area director wants it to be informational to make that change at the time it's adopted, but I don't want this to get hung up for a year in a process where we agglomerate many unrelated things.
Yeah, so for me, that kind of so really needs or would be then we show that. I completely agree with that.
Could I get the chairs to send out a call for adoption to the mailing list?
So I think we can already, I think, so the document is definitely in scope of the charter. We can start the call for adoption. We can already have it, I think, today and hear how many people have read or support adoption of this document. Please manifest yourself. So Carsten.
Manifesting, okay. I can voice an opinion. This is Hank. Sorry, Line. Hi.
Go ahead, Hank.
So I think it's rather straightforward. I have to agree with Mike here. It's all about the representation of a date and a days since epoch. So I think it's both such a semantic representation here that is changing, and it is just another another representation, both of them. So I am totally fine with this. We have another draft forthcoming that is focusing on time, and so I assume that these are not conflicting, and therefore we can separate this. And if ISO is in, yes, fine. There's no reason to stall. And now next in queue, if I'm fine.
And Hank, I'd be fine to review the time one when it comes along, but I agree that they're not conflicting.
Yeah.
So this is Lawrence. I've read it. I did an initial implementation of it. I support it, although I do get a little worried that we're have too many time formats in CBOR at some point, but this one is fine.
Thank you. Yes, and I see some more +1, Ira and Peter as well. So I think this is great, and we will confirm in the mailing list, or we will start a call for adoption in the mailing list as well.
I
Hank
think I
wants
like
to
the
say
idea
something.
of actually taking the sense of the room, even in online meetings, because we will have online meetings for a long time, and just confirm it on the mailing list.
Yeah, I mean, maybe people don't really have an opinion, but if people do have an opinion, it's good that they get a chance to express it when they can. So Hank, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to Lawrence. Hi, Lawrence, by the way, I didn't see you. This is about dates, and there's a subtle but very distinct differentiation between dates and times, I think, or time references, effectively. So I'm not concerned about having too many tags, as this is a separate lane, so to speak.
Okay.
Okay. Great. So I think we can move forward.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mike. Next on the agenda, CDDL freezer that was left over from last meeting. Carsten, go ahead.
Do you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. So we have maintained more or less this freezer document from discussions we had about CDDL. And there are a number of things in there that we probably need to do sooner or later. So, for instance, one message on the mailing list reminded us that we really need to think about file inclusion and export and import interfaces and so on, which is also listed in the freezer document. So we should go ahead and develop some strawman how we are going to do this. There are a couple of things that actually could be taken out of the freezer document and processed as extensions for CDDL. And one is this .abnf thing that has been around for a while. And I mentioned that 2 weeks ago. This is essentially the whole proposal on one slide as an example. So the idea would be that like we have control operators for doing regexps, we might as well have control operators for doing ABNF. And since ABNF is multi-line, this is using a slightly ugly hack, which is using the byte string syntax instead of the text string syntax for the ABNF. Just because the byte string syntax includes new lines and the text string syntax doesn't, because it's inherited from JSON. So that is a little weird, but it saves us from actually having to change the CDDL parser. So what you see here is CDDL production in the middle of this slide, RFC 3339 equals. And this essentially means we are defining one string here that is containing the ABNF from RFC 3339 that we're interested in. So the example actually would be used in a context like Mike's draft. So we have the definitions for date for year and all that. And actually, since this is also using material from RFC 5234, there is a separate string with that material, and we're using another control operator which is currently called .cad. That might change to concatenate these two things. And then finally, in the place where this is used, further up in the slide, where we have full date and date time, there is the name of a production followed on a new line with the ABNF. So this is something that can be used with .abnf to actually reference this production. That's essentially my proposal. There are a few little things that probably need to be ironed out. One is ABNF is operating in an abstract space of characters, but we have to map this abstract space to something concrete that can be represented in CBOR. So I'm proposing to have two variants. One where ABNF is used for describing UTF-8 characters, and the other one where ABNF is used to describe bytes. So there would be something like an ABNF for UTF-8 and an ABNF for bytes. And then for .cad, we might want to use a slightly different construct called .join, and I think we have to make a few examples for that. So this is not completely done, and in particular, I haven't actually implemented that yet. But I think it's a proposal that should be implementable enough and stable enough at this point that we could adopt it as a working group document. And it would go right into the existing extension points of RFC 8610. So we wouldn't need to actually respin this in any way or update it in any way. It just defines three or four new control operators, and that's all that's needed to make this happen. So my question would be whether people think this is something we should be pursuing. Of course, that point of view will depend a lot on whether the specification you are working on right now actually uses something that is already specified in ABNF or not. But for those that actually do, this is a really useful extension that saves you from having to re-encode ABNF in regular expressions or something like that. Any opinion?
Well, this is Henk. You selected a single item from the freezer, which is fine because this is basically yeah, better tested, so to speak. So question is, how do we compartmentalize this, I assume? My suspicion is that there might be more than the ABMF control or the corresponding BF controls effectively that we could do in the first chunk. So my question would be, are there other things that are in high demand, so we have to do it, or that we want to stack into the first control point extension draft?
So this is kind of related to what the chairs had started and Carsten working on when we did that questionnaire, and I went around and asked people. I don't know if you remember, what was that, IETF 105 maybe? And now that got kind of on the back burner. But yeah, the question would be how urgent this is compared to the rest of the items on that list. And does it make sense to just do it right now separately from everything else?
I think I would like to see more documents rather than fewer documents, so that we can deal with each item, each extension point independently in terms of progression. So I don't think I'd like to see a big, huge document with lots of different things in it, because that means that everything progresses at the rate of the slowest one. Whereas we break things up, then each can progress at its own rate.
That makes sense, but there is also the fact that the author might be the same for several of those. So it's not parallel. I don't know. It can be parallel working, sure, but time is limited, so there will be some prioritization to be done anyway.
Yes. So I'm usually pretty efficient at doing things where I know how to do them. So the other thing that I think needs to be extracted from the freezer now and worked on is the JSON format, because it has been become clear that this is needed in places like SDF and so on. And so that's another thing where it's pretty clear how to do it. It does require some review from people, from other implementers, for instance, but it can be done without taking a humongous amount of time. While doing something like a module interface, which I think would be the highest priority thing right now, that actually requires a few proposals, going through discussions with that. It's not something where I would know how to do it. And I don't think we need to wait for all the highest priority things to be done before we can finish some of the more targeted use lower priority things.
Go ahead, Hank.
Yeah, just try to. We are the small group here, so maybe we don't need the queue. But from the top of my head, I would assume that it makes sense. And Carsten, please tell me if you don't think this, but I'm pretty sure this is okay to bundle controls in because they're using the extension point for CDA controls into a single draft, and then, for example, have the JSON representation of CDDL in a separate document. Just picking out two obvious sides of the coin, I assume. Does that
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, I would like to have that.
So what other controls do we have in a ready to use shape?
So I'm pretty sure that we could address the bit field one.
Okay.
I assume. Also, I think it's very intuitive. I
think
don't
it's a
see a lot
large
of
can of worms.
caveats. So again?
I think it's a large can of worms.
Yes, of course. Again,
we can do the ABNF thing because 20 years were already spent on honing that one. So we don't have to invent another text-based grammar. For the Bitfield side, I think we have a lot of design space. So I expect a lot of discussions before that gets finished.
or you want to separate ABNF because ABNF was not a ABNF controls. Okay. So if you are, I was choosing JSON as an example because that was not a control, and that is a relatively well-scoped problem statement. Yeah, we can always start the draft, I think, with all the controls, see what progresses well, and then make a cut. Sorry for the pun, to stop there, and then put the rest into the next document and finalize the things we think are progressing well enough. So just working on it and unfreeze it basically is the thing I would like to do, because I'm waiting. So meanwhile, I think a more fleshed out cuts concept really would help. And
Yes.
so that is freezed for way too long now, I think. So unfreezing would be my first priority, then grouping basically into controls and non-controls, and then progress these until we realize, okay, these controls are actually really complicated, and then we stagger them into two drafts, the accomplishable ones after, they say, a quarter or 6 months or something, and then go with the rest.
Yeah, one procedure of doing this would be to keep all control operator proposals in one document at this point. And then at some point decide these are the ones that we will ship in 2020. And then we split it up and keep a document for things that we will ship in 2021 and later and so on.
Yeah.
So I think that might work.
Okay. I would also support my proposal. That's fine. I think it's good.
Any more opinions about this? Both the form and the content. Form meaning one document, several documents, etc.
This is Ira. I would favor, I think, several documents. I would be particularly happy to see ABNF because another standards body that I work in the last 25 years, all of our specifications that conceivably would be CBOR encoded are in ABNF.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Carsten, I would say go ahead and submit a draft then that people can start commenting on. And ultimately, it's up to you as author, while the document is still individual, to decide what you feel like, what you think makes most sense to have in there. And this is obviously in CBOR Charter. So we can possibly rediscuss that when it gets adopted.
Right.
But yeah, probably the more focus it is, the easiest it would be to move it forward quicker. I mean, that seems logical. Anything more about the freezer? I think that was everything you had.
That was the one thing I wanted to focus on. As I said, the JSON thing is another thing we could extract pretty quickly, and that's on the production side. On the consumption side, I think it's pretty clear that we need to do this export-import interface thing, and we need to make actual proposals. So the freezer document doesn't currently provide a proposal for that, and that would be the next step.
Okay. Great. Next, I think that was all we had on the agenda for today. If there is any other business we need to discuss. If there is nothing else, I'd like to remind, I think everybody signed the blue sheet. That's great. Also, we have these, I see a lot of people that are joining either for the first or second time, and we have these interims every 2 weeks, so you're very welcome to join. And I think that's it for today, and I'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.